are watching SADPIE Enterprises.
Hello, everybody. We are your hosts, John Mason,
Kevin Delgado.
And Ray Chang.
and welcome back to another episode of Our Ways of Life on SADPIE Enterprises. Last episode, Ray, Kevin, and I took a closer look into the unique traditions, culture, and the lives of Chinese American communities in the past, starting from their earliest immigration to the United States with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad to the present day. In this episode, we will be discussing the immigration history and significant achievements of one of the largest Asian minority groups in the U.S., Korean Americans. Please, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy our newest episode. As this time we go through this unique immigration story of Koreans of hardship and endurance.
For starters, it is important that we go look at an overview of Korean American immigration if we want to better understand the contributions and struggles of Korean Americans on a large general level before diving into the individual achievements of notable Korean American figures. Now, what is the story of Korean immigration that many of us may not know about? What are the challenges that Korean Americans faced along the way in this migration journey?
The earliest immigration of the Korean people to the United States can be traced back as early as the late 19th century, during which a small group of Korean individuals migrated to the United States after diplomatic relations were established between both the United States and Korea. And one of the most prominent of these individuals was Yoo Jil-jun, a Korean politician and intellectual who was who's regarded as the first Korean student in the United States, who he consequently became interested in Western studies and was a leading figure in what was known as the Korean Patriotic Enlightenment movement, which challenged the policy of seclusion under the contemporary Joseon dynasty, which would establish the first initial diplomatic ties between the United States and Korea. After political ties were established between the United States and Korea, thanks to the efforts of Enlightenment individuals, we see three distinct periods of immigration in the United States by Koreans. The first being in 1903, which saw the arrival of Korean immigrants on the RMS Gaelic to Hawaii, which was recently annexed by the United States in years before, in order to work on pineapple and sugar plantations, who sought better economic opportunities like the Chinese American immigrants during the Qing dynasty in China. As a result of this combined with the as a result of this combined with the need for cheap labor, Korean Americans came to replace the previously popular Chinese American laborers after the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, prohibiting any more Chinese laborers to the United States.
Okay, now we see that Korean Americans initially migrated to U.S. territory like the large majority of immigrants of other ethnicities during this age of industrialism to find better economic opportunities and better lives than what they had in their home countries, which were full of a multitude of problems like famine, disaster, war, and political conflict. But how else were Korean Americans impacted by migrating to U.S. besides being able to find labor for low wages?
Well, these Korean immigrant workers also came to be more religiously active than other minorities like Japanese and Chinese Americans as a result of over one half of the immigrants on the RMS Gaelic ship being recruited by missionaries Horace Allen and George Herbert Jones from the Neri Methodist Church close to Incheon. From the religious influence that they picked up from these two missionaries, the Korean immigrants would form their own ethnic churches, like the first Korean Methodist Church in Honolulu, Hawaii, in the U.S. mainland. In the U.S. mainland, after their award contracts on Hawaii expired, where they would find comfort of one another as cultural and language barriers separated them from the vast majority of the U.S. population. Alongside establishing churches, Korean immigrants also created businesses like laundry stores for self-employment, while others returned back to Korea for their difficulties in adjusting to the foreign culture of the US. Koreans would continue migrating to the US until 1924, when the Oriental Exclusion Act was passed, which prohibited all Asians from immigrating to the US, though Asian students were still allowed to study at different US educational institutions.
All right, well, that's very interesting, Ray. So this marks the end of the first major wave of Korean immigration to the United States, but within the second wave, we would see the persistence of Korean Americans struggling to fit into American society. Um, let's take a look at these new struggles. Maybe John, you can go into that.
Sure. Later on, in 1950, 26 years after the passing of the Oriental Exclusion Act, we would see the second wave of Korean immigration to the United States as a result of internal and global conflict. Shortly following the end of World War II, Korea would be divided into two political entities, North and South Korea. The North was under a communist regime supported by the Soviet Union, and the South was under a democratic government supported by the US during the Cold War, which basically sparked mutual antagonism and fueled the outbreak of the Korean War. The brutality of the war forced a large wave of Korean immigrants to U.S., and consequently Asian exclusion from immigrating to the U.S. was nullified, and Asian Americans could apply for citizenship. These immigrants largely consisted of Korean wives of American soldiers called war brides, orphans of American families, and others like students and intellectuals. These first two groups experienced the same issue of adjusting to American life, like the first wave of Korean immigrants, or possibly harsher. War brides were forced to stay on military bases. Korean orphans were known as GI babies, who were seen as racially impure babies, and their mothers were treated like prostitutes. On the other hand, the third group were well accepted and integrated into American society, though they became associated with the title of the model minority.
Yes, and later into the Cold War, as restrictions on Asian immigration were lifted further, we would see a third wave of Korean American immigration and in 1965, the Immigration and Naturalization Act was passed and took down the national quota system that persisted in the US for the first half of the 20th century, thus allowing for the reunification of Korean families. This lift was a result of America's need for more skilled professionals, and many of which were able to be recruited from Asia, therefore resulting in the migration of Asian professionals and their families. Other Koreans were also driven to immigrate to the US due to the high employment rate and the political insecurity within Korea. By this time, the Korean diaspora community was the most populous group of immigrants within the US, and it continues to rank among the top of largest immigrant minorities in the US.
So, that being said, the immigration history of Korean Americans is very much unique and complex. However, it's very quite similar to that of Chinese Americans who we last discussed in our previous podcast last week, in that they both face the same issues of political and social instability at their home countries and suffer the same racial exclusionist policies, like the Oriental Exclusion Act.
Okay, and now to further appreciate and gain a deeper insight into the immigration history of Koreans to the United States, it is essential that we look at the different contributions that Korean Americans had on the US, as they have, like other minority groups, have had a significant impact on American society in various fields like academics, arts, politics, and the culture of the US. So, who are some of these individuals and what significant impacts did they have on the progression of American society?
Well, to start, there have been several Korean American individuals who have been important for causes surrounding advocacy of civil rights and liberty. One of these individuals was Pak Yong-man, who was a prominent author and a political activist who is known for his efforts towards advancing Korean independence and democracy. He took on a leading role in the Korean independence movement in the United States, which was an important cause to the first wave of Korean American immigrants, as their home country, Korea, was under the regime of Japan, which would cease after World War II. Pak Yong-man's efforts helped in bringing awareness towards the Korean cause for Korean independence from Japan and bringing out its eventual liberation, which would allow for the second wave of Korean migration towards the US during the Korean War. Another important advocacy individual is Grace Lee Boggs, who was also an author and activist who is known for her efforts in civil rights, labor, and feminist movements. She was a key figure in Detroit's African American community and the Black liberation movement for Asian Americans, and today empowers generations of activists to fight for social reformation.
Yes, and besides these advocacy individuals, there are several more significant Korean American individuals who also made significant contributions to U.S. society in different fields of science, such as engineering, physics, chemistry, biology. So, for example, there is Chung Soo-yu, known for his research at Space Systems Laboratory at the Georgia Institute of Technology on satellite systems and space mission design. There's also Jung Kim, who was crucial in the development of broadband internet and mobile communication technologies, and Jin Chun-yu, who conducted groundbreaking research in organic chemistry by developing the field of carbon-hydrogen activation. The huge contributions of Korean American individuals are largely not well known by many people, and this ignorance that we may have of the role of Korean Americans in the United States can result in this limited, narrow view that we develop, which would result in our association, our tendency to associate certain stereotypes with specific ethnicity groups like Korean Americans. By learning more about the history, the struggles, and the accomplishments of different ethnicities, we are not only doing others a favor, but we are doing ourselves a favor by taking our time to learn and appreciate the unique immigration story that these ethnicities have to share. We develop a sense of understanding and expand our multicultural knowledge, which is invaluable in today's society, where it drives us to change for the better and to encourage that change. When the motive for social change is present, it becomes contagious, filling the area of one community and expands to several communities, which allows us to enjoy a peaceful society.
That well said. It looks like that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you for listening to this episode of SADPIE Enterprises, Our Ways of Life series. Next week, we'll be covering the immigration history and notable achievements of Japanese Americans who have just as unique and just as remarkable of a story to share as do the Korean and Chinese Americans that make up the United States. If you're interested by this episode, we encourage you to continue research on Korean American immigration, as there is so much more than what we have covered in our episode here today. This has been your host, Kevin Delgado,
John Mason.
And Ray Chang.
Covering the history of Korean immigrants and their contributions to the society of the United States. We hope to see you next episode. But for now, have a wonderful day, evening, and night, wherever you are.